From the Evening Standard in London, I'm David Marsland, and this is The Leader.
So this is the Worcester?
Yes, you know your borders there.
Well, no, it just says so up here.
With his COVID winter plan still under wraps, Boris Johnson toured the British Gas Training Academy in Leicester, as if daring the headline writers to do their worst. Here he is, as scientists warn of another COVID peak, getting a lesson on how to deal with pressure.
You're checking the pressure of the gas.
And we're better to get advice on what to do about a leak than from a gas company.
This thing, you're checking this whole thing isn't leaking.
So this part will be a fast, so 1 minute we're testing this bit to make sure there's no gas coming in.
Meanwhile, although many of the coronavirus proposals for the rest of this year have been widely trailed, the PM is staying tight-lipped on at least one aspect.
Can you rule out a winter lockdown, or is it still potentially on the table?
We've got to do everything that's right to protect the country, but the way things are going at the moment, we're very confident in the steps that we've taken. I'll be setting out a lot more tomorrow. I'll be giving you a full update on the plans for the autumn and the winter.
And that is not a no. Well, our deputy political editor, David Bond, is in our Westminster office and he joins me now. David, there's been a lot of speculation about a pandemic firebreak and everyone sent back to their homes in face masks. Is there anything more to those rumours?
Well, it's very interesting because Boris Johnson was saying that they've got to do everything that's right to protect the country. So he's not ruled it out at this stage, despite there being lots of opposition to it from his backbenchers, the idea of having yet another lockdown, and despite the comments from his own cabinet. So I think, it's unlikely, but I think at the moment Johnson wants to keep it in his back pocket.
Have they completely ruled out vaccine passports now, though?
Well, again, there's some confusion and uncertainty. I mean, we had Nadhim Zahawi last week telling MPs that the plan was to still introduce them into nightclubs by the end of the month. That then by Sunday you had Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, saying that actually it had been ruled out completely for now. So I think there is confusion. Number 10 again have sort of said that they want to retain the ability to use them at some point if needed. So I think there is a great deal of uncertainty. I think the only thing you can say for sure now is that they won't be coming in by the end of the month.
And we also have some uncertainty about face mask use as well, don't we?
Yeah, and again, I think, so much of this, it will be really interesting to see what's in the detail when we get Boris Johnson's winter plan tomorrow. But Therese Coffey, the Work and Pension Secretary, was saying on Monday morning that a lot of these are sensible measures, I think were her exact words, that they want to look at retaining, because I think the truth is, as the cases rise and it runs into winter flu, they're absolutely desperate not to have the health service overwhelmed again. So I think that they will just want to try and retain as many powers as possible, while at the same time signalling that they won't go back to those draconian lockdown measures, which really caused the economy to grind to a halt.
So I guess with all of this rumour and speculation going around, you can see why the Prime Minister kind of feels like he needs to make a statement to clear things up, doesn't he? And I guess, I wonder if that's been a theme throughout this pandemic, that it's all been a little bit muddy at times and people haven't been certain about what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. Critics of the government would say, well, they haven't helped themselves here because they've performed so many U-turns. I mean, again, you saw it going back to the point about vaccine certification over the weekend. You had one minister saying one thing on, I think it was Wednesday. I think you had another minister, Oliver Dowden, on Friday saying that the plan was to still introduce them. Then by Sunday, you had Sajid Javid saying completely the opposite, and now number 10 saying, well, they might still come in. So I think they don't help themselves with some of the messaging. It is obviously complicated. It's a fast-moving situation. The truth is no one really knows what's going to happen. At the moment, the data looks like it's going in the right direction in terms of hospitalisations and deaths, but there is still a possibility of a new variant coming along, or if the vaccine starts to not be, as effective through the winter months, then Boris Johnson would be face all sorts of criticism if he was then to say, well, I'm going to rule out taking any of these measures in the future if the NHS looks like being overwhelmed.
One thing we do know, in fact, pretty much the only thing we know about the impact of coronavirus right now is its effect on the economy. We can see it laid bare. We know there have been job losses. And the Prime Minister's been talking about trying to kind of re-up the economy today, hasn't he?
He has. And I mean, if you look at the GDP figures for last week, again, sort of signalling some concern about the true effects coming through on the economy. after the sort of boost with reopening coming in the summer, that perhaps the economic recovery, is going to level off a bit. It's not going to be as strong as expected. So clearly the Chancellor Rishi Sunak extremely worried about this. I think one of the things that Johnson really wants to do is try and get people's focus post-pandemic on the economic recovery, on job creation. So he was obviously very keen to be talking up sort of apprenticeships and jobs for graduates during his visit to Leicester on Monday, to try and create this sense that there are a lot of jobs out there. Again, Therese Coffey was talking about the number of vacancies, and this sense that that their plan to save jobs has worked. They're very keen to emphasise the way that the furlough scheme has helped a lot of people out, but that, the furlough scheme is winding down, and so you might start to see that coming through in terms of unemployment numbers in the coming weeks. But, whether the economic recovery can sort of hold course is a very big question for Johnson.
Yeah, and if he wants to shift the conversation away from the pandemic itself and back towards levelling up the country, as he says, then avoiding that overwhelming of the NHS over these coming months is going to be essential to that, isn't it, David?
Yeah, absolutely. Hence, we go back to that point about the lockdown, that, they really can't afford to have another lockdown, in the coming months. They'll be desperate to avoid that at all costs. And one of the interesting things to look for in the winter plan when it comes on Tuesday will be to just see which pieces of legislation are going to be taken out of the government's toolbox on this, because that will tell us which things they think they no longer need. So things like, laws to close schools, to detain infectious people, restrict large gatherings and other events. That will really give us a sense of the direction of travel. Of course, they can always just bring back in legislation at a later date, as they did during the real peak of the pandemic. But I think, I think they want to message to people that this thing is over, that Boris Johnson is keen that people learn to live with it, even though, of course, deaths are still at a significant level.
You can read more from David in the Evening Standard newspaper and online at standard.co.uk, where you'll also be able to follow breaking news on this story and everything else on our live blog. That's the Leader Podcast. We're back tomorrow at 4 p.m.